White woman brings homeless guy home. Her sister laughs, but then she sees his true size. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Clara Bennett had always believed in giving people a second chance. Raised by two loving parents in the quiet suburbs of Colorado, she grew up surrounded by animals, books, and a deep desire to make the world better. Now 28 years old and working as a wildlife biologist, she had returned home for a short break between research trips. One rainy evening, while picking up groceries at a local store, Clara noticed a man sitting alone under the awning. He looked cold, wet, and worn down by life. His clothes were torn, his boots caked in mud, and his face was partially hidden by a hood. Most shoppers ignored him, or worse, stared with silent judgment. But Clara stopped. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The man looked up. His eyes were deep brown, tired, but alert. "I'm fine," he replied, voice low, "just waiting for the rain to pass." Something about the way he spoke, calm, controlled, didn't match the way he looked. Clara hesitated, then made a decision she knew her sister would call crazy. "I live just a few blocks from here," she said. "If you need somewhere dry to rest, I have a guest room." "Just until you get back on your feet." He studied her face for a moment, as if testing whether she was serious. "You don't even know me." "I know you're human," Clara said with a kind smile. "That's enough." By the time they got back to Clara's small, plant-filled home, the rain had picked up. She gave him a towel, a clean sweatshirt, and a warm bowl of soup. He introduced himself as James. Just James. No last name, no backstory, no complaints. He was quiet, polite, and surprisingly tidy. Later that evening, Clara's sister Lauren stopped by. As soon as she walked in, Lauren's perfectly manicured nails gripped her designer purse tighter. Her eyes landed on James, who was sitting silently at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "Who is that?" she asked, not even bothering to whisper. "He's staying here for a while," Clara replied casually. "He needed help," Lauren scoffed. "You let a homeless guy into your house? Seriously, Clara?" "You could get robbed, or worse." James stood slowly. "I'll go. I don't want to cause trouble." But Clara shook her head. "You're not causing trouble. Lauren was just leaving." Lauren's eyes widened. "You're choosing a stranger over your own sister?" "No," Clara said firmly. "I'm choosing kindness." That night, as James slept in the guest room, Clara couldn't stop thinking. Who was he really? His hands were rough, like someone used to physical labor, but his vocabulary was articulate. He never asked for anything, and he never offered information. Still, there was something different about him. The next morning, Clara brewed fresh coffee and tapped lightly on the guest room door. "James, you want breakfast?" After a pause, his voice came through. "Sure. I'll be out in a minute." When he stepped into the kitchen, freshly showered and wearing the clean clothes she had laid out, Clara caught herself staring. Not because of how he looked, but because of how he carried himself. Tall, strong, but humble. Like a man used to being in control, now learning to let go. Later that day, Clara received a message from her ex-boyfriend, Bradley, asking if she'd like to attend a local fundraiser that evening. She agreed, thinking it might be a good distraction. But when she mentioned it over dinner, James simply said, "I'll stay here, if that's okay." "Of course," Clara smiled. "Mi casa es su casa." As she drove off, she couldn't shake the feeling that James wasn't who he claimed to be, not in a dangerous way, but in a hidden way. And she wasn't sure why, but she wanted to know more. Back at home, James stood by the window, watching the rain return. He sipped the last of his tea and whispered to himself, "She has no idea who I really am." The next morning, Clara woke early to the smell of coffee. She walked into the kitchen to find James already up, shirt sleeves rolled, pouring 2 mugs. "I wasn't sure how you like it," he said. "So I made it black." She smiled, a bit surprised. "That's perfect. Thank you." He nodded, then sat down across from her with quiet dignity. There was a sense of calm in him, like someone who had seen too much of the world to be shaken by much anymore. Later that afternoon, Clara's sister Lauren invited her to a small backyard brunch at her upscale home in Denver. Clara hesitated, but agreed, on one condition. "Can James come with me?" Lauren's scoff was instant. "You're kidding, right?" "I'm not. He's my guest." Lauren rolled her eyes. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." Clara told James about the invitation, half expecting him to decline. But to her surprise, he agreed. "You sure you want to go?" she asked. He gave a small, careful shrug. "Why not? Might be fun." The moment they arrived, it was clear they didn't belong. The guests were dressed in tailored suits, silk dresses, and polished shoes. James wore clean jeans, a button-up shirt Clara had lent him, and old boots, worn but honest. Lauren greeted them at the door with a forced smile. "Clara, you look nice. And James?" "Welcome." A few of Lauren's friends eyed James, then whispered behind champagne glasses. "Is that the guy staying at her place?" She brought him to a brunch. Bold. Maybe it's one of those rescue projects. She always had a savior complex. Clara felt her cheeks burn, but James remained unfazed, his hands calmly folded in his lap. Enter Bradley Shaw, Clara's ex. Perfect suit, arrogant smirk, and no filter. "Well, well," he said loudly as he approached. "Clara, didn't expect to see you here with company." Clara forced a smile. "Hi, Bradley." He turned to James. "You the new boyfriend? Or just a house guest?" James simply nodded. "Just passing through." Bradley chuckled. "Of course. Hey man, you need some shoes? I have an old pair I use for yard work." "Might be an upgrade." The group around them laughed. James didn't. Clara gripped her drink tightly. "That's enough, Brad." But Bradley kept going. "I mean, come on. What are you thinking, Clara? You're bringing a homeless guy to a brunch in Cherry Creek? What's next? Letting him drive your car?" The laughter got louder. Even Lauren chuckled under her breath. And then James stood up. Slowly, calmly, with the kind of presence that made everyone go quiet. He looked at Bradley, then at the group. "You laugh because you're uncomfortable. That's fine. I've lived through worse." No one responded. James nodded to Clara. "Thanks for bringing me. I think I've had enough." He walked out with steady steps, not rushed, not embarrassed, just done. Clara followed after him. "James, I'm so sorry," she said as they reached the car. "You don't have to apologize for them," he replied, voice steady. "But now you know how they see people like me." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I don't see you that way." He looked at her, eyes searching. "Then stop surrounding yourself with people who do." That night, James sat out on the back porch, staring at the stars. Clara joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "I never expected you to come with me today," she said. "I thought it was time I saw what kind of world you live in." "And?" He smiled faintly. "It's fast, loud, and built on appearances." "I prefer trees." She chuckled. "Me too." There was a long pause. "Thank you for defending me," he said. "Not many would." Clara glanced at him, then looked away. "I just hate bullies." But the truth was, she hated how much it hurt to see people judge him. Because deep down, something inside her was beginning to care. More than she expected, more than she wanted to admit. The day after the brunch, Clara couldn't focus. She tried to finish some reports for her upcoming wildlife research trip, but her thoughts kept drifting back to James. Not the way he'd been treated, not even the calm strength in how he'd walked away. No, it was something else. The way he stood. The way silence seemed to surround him like armor. And if she was honest, the way he made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. That evening, Clara came home early from work, exhausted. The house was quiet, the lights dim. She tossed her bag on the couch and headed to the kitchen. A soft humming sound came from the hallway. She paused. It was the shower. James must have come back early. She grabbed a folder she had left in the hallway near the bathroom. As she passed, she noticed the bathroom door was half open, just enough to let out a stream of warm mist. She didn't mean to look. But her eyes drifted, and what she saw made her freeze. James stood with his back to the door, under the running water. His body was lean and muscular, not the kind of strength that came from a gym, but from years of real work. Scars ran across his shoulders. His arms flexed slightly as he washed. And then she saw it. It wasn't just his physical strength. It was presence. Size, power, and yet it was quiet. He moved like someone who didn't need attention to be commanding. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her pulse quickened. She turned away quickly. "What am I doing?" and hurried back to the living room. She sat on the couch, heart pounding. That wasn't supposed to happen. He was just a guest, a stranger, someone she'd helped out of compassion. But now she couldn't unsee it. His back, his scars. The way water traced his body. Clara put her hands over her face. "Get it together," she whispered. Later, James stepped into the living room, hair damp, wearing the same clean clothes she'd lent him. He noticed her flushed expression, but said nothing. "You okay?" he asked. Clara forced a nod. "Yeah. Just long day." He nodded slowly. "Dinner's on me tonight. I make a mean grilled cheese." She laughed, grateful for the change of subject. "Deal." They ate in the small kitchen, and for a while, the tension melted away. James told her about odd jobs he used to do, construction, repairing fences, even building a cabin in Oregon. "I've always worked with my hands," he said. "It keeps me grounded." Clara looked at him. "Why'd you leave it all behind?" His eyes darkened slightly. "Sometimes, when you come from money, people only see the money, not the man." She tilted her head. "You came from money?" James froze for half a second, then smiled faintly. "A long time ago. Doesn't matter anymore, but it did, and she knew it." The next morning, Clara met her best friend Jenna for coffee. Jenna was warm, supportive, and had known Clara since college. "So, what's this I hear about a mystery man in your house?" Jenna teased. Clara sighed. "It's not what you think. He's not some fling. He's different. Strong, quiet, respectful. And I accidentally saw him in the shower yesterday." Jenna nearly choked on her coffee. "Girl, what?" Clara leaned in, whispering. "I didn't mean to. The door was open." "But, Jenna, I can't get the image out of my head." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Was it that good?" Clara gave a look. "Let's just say, he's a lot more than what people think." That night, Clara found herself lingering around James again. He was sitting on the back porch, shirt sleeves rolled, sketching something in a small notebook. "What are you working on?" she asked. He looked up, a little caught off guard. "Just an idea." She sat beside him. "You sketch?" "Not really. Just thoughts, plans. I used to help design eco-buildings, green architecture." Clara blinked. "That's impressive?" He shrugged. Didn't stick. People in suits ruined it. She looked at him longer this time, trying to piece him together. This wasn't just a drifter. This was a man hiding from something big, and suddenly she wanted to know everything. Clara couldn't sleep. It wasn't just the image of James in the shower, or the feel of his quiet presence around the house. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. There was too much about him that didn't make sense. His posture, his manners. The way he spoke, moved, looked people in the eye like he'd once been in charge of rooms much bigger than her tiny kitchen. And then there was that sketchbook. The next morning, as James stepped out for a walk, Clara slipped into the back porch and found the notebook he'd left on the table. She didn't want to snoop, but curiosity got the better of her. Opening it, she expected random scribbles. Instead, she found blueprints, detailed drawings of eco-housing layouts, rainwater systems, off-grid power grids, with notes written in neat, confident handwriting, phrases like Q2 target, client concerns, and supply chain risk. This wasn't some random guy drifting through town. This was someone educated, experienced, professional. Clara closed the book and sat down, stunned. Later that day, she confronted him gently. "You know a lot more than you let on," she said. James raised an eyebrow. "Do I? I saw your sketchbook. Those aren't doodles. They're architectural blueprints, with business notes." James didn't speak for a moment. Then he sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and sat down. "I used to work in sustainable design," he said quietly. "Then I walked away." "Why?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because the people I worked with stopped caring about the planet. It was all money and image, so I left, gave it all up." Clara stared. "So, you were rich?" "I was," he admitted. "Still am, technically, but I haven't used my name in a long time." "What name?" He hesitated. Then, James Carter. The words hit her like a bolt of lightning. The Carter Group was a massive green tech company. She had studied one of their reports in college. The founder's son had vanished from public life almost 6 years ago. "You're that James Carter?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't want to be defined by it. So I disappeared. No press, no drama. Just silence." Clara sat back, trying to absorb it. "Does my sister know?" James let out a soft, ironic laugh. "Lauren? She dated me once, years ago, when I still wore suits and talked numbers." Clara's eyes widened. "She dumped me the moment I said I was stepping away from the company," he said. "Didn't even ask why." That night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. Her sister had mocked him, called him worthless, and the man she'd looked down on was worth more, in every sense, than any of them could imagine. And what did that say about her? That she hadn't seen it either? No, she had seen something. Not the money, not the name, but the man, the kindness, the self-respect, the quiet strength. She remembered the brunch, the way he stood there, silent, as they laughed. Now she realized he could have shut them down with one sentence, but he didn't. Because he didn't need to prove anything to people who didn't care. And that made him even more powerful. The next day, Clara got a call from Lauren. "Hey," her sister said casually, "there's this charity gala next week downtown. I need a +1. I was thinking, maybe James? Clara narrowed her eyes. "You mean the guy you laughed at last week?" "Well, I didn't know he was that James Carter," Lauren replied quickly. "Besides, I think he could make some good connections there." "Might be good for him." Clara's voice turned sharp. "He doesn't need your help, Lauren." "Clara, relax," Lauren said with a short laugh. "Don't get all protective over a guy you barely know." "I know enough," Lauren paused. So, are you two, like, a thing? Clara didn't answer, because she didn't know. Not yet. But she wanted to. That evening, Clara walked out to the backyard where James was trimming overgrown plants. She stood quietly for a moment, watching him. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. He looked up, calm. "Would you have treated me the same?" "Yes," she said. "But I would have understood you better." James nodded thoughtfully. "I've had people want me for my name, for my money. For the Carter legacy. I didn't want that here." "You think I'm like that?" "No," he said simply. "That's why I stayed." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and her heart ached with how deeply she cared. For the man he was before she knew his name. And that was the moment she realized. She wasn't confused anymore. She was falling. Clara didn't want to go. The charity gala Lauren had mentioned was filled with the exact kind of people James had tried to escape. Elites in designer suits, plastic smiles, and fake morals. But Lauren insisted, and somehow convinced James to come. "You sure about this?" Clara asked him as they got ready. James adjusted the tie Clara had picked out for him. "If I keep hiding, I'll never move forward." She nodded, both nervous and proud. The Denver Civic Center shimmered with golden lights. Waiters weaved through crowds with trays of champagne. Clara wore a deep blue gown. James, for the first time in years, wore a crisp, tailored suit. Heads turned when they walked in, not because of fame, but because of presence. James had that calm, tall, composed. Clara could feel the weight of whispers around them. "Is that? No way." "James Carter? Here?" Lauren approached them with a bright smile. "You clean up well," she said, eyes flicking to his watch. James gave her a polite nod. "Good to see you too, Lauren." Bradley, of course, was there. He hadn't forgotten the brunch incident, and his ego still stung. As the room filled and the music settled, the MC called for silence. "We'd like to invite a few generous sponsors to say a few words, starting with Mr. Bradley Shaw." Bradley adjusted his cufflinks and stepped on stage with an air of superiority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, flashing his signature smug grin, "thank you for being here to support clean energy. Unlike some people, I didn't just disappear when the work got hard." Clara frowned. Bradley continued, turning his gaze to James. "Some of us stayed, built something real. Didn't run off to pretend to be a vagabond in the woods." Low laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara's heart sank. Bradley smirked. "I mean, who brings a homeless man to a charity gala? Oh, right, my ex. Always had a soft spot for strays." The laughter got louder. James remained still, unmoved, eyes fixed on Bradley like he'd heard this kind of garbage too many times before. Clara stood up, furious. "That's enough." But Bradley didn't stop. "Tell me, Carter, how's it feel pretending to be someone you're not? Or is that who you've always been, a coward in a borrowed suit?" The room went silent. James finally rose to his feet. He walked calmly to the front of the room, passing Bradley without a word. He stepped onto the stage, took the microphone from the stunned MC, and faced the crowd. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," James said. His voice was calm, even. "But since I've been publicly invited into the conversation, let me be clear." He paused. "My name is James Carter." Yes, that James Carter. And I didn't vanish. I walked away. Because I refused to let a boardroom full of men like Bradley here use my family's name to cover up the destruction they were causing behind the scenes. Gasps rippled across the room. "I lived simply," he continued. "Not to hide, but to remember what matters, and I can tell you, none of it is in this room." The crowd was stunned. Bradley turned red. James placed the mic back into the MC's hand and walked off stage. Clara's eyes burned, not with shame, but with pride. He had said nothing cruel, but he had spoken more powerfully than any insult, and now everyone knew the truth. Outside, James stood under the night sky, breathing in the cool air. Clara followed. "I can't believe you did that," she said, almost breathless. He looked at her. "Was it too much?" "No," she said softly. "It was exactly right." He nodded, quiet again. It felt final. That night back at home, James started packing. Clara walked in, confused. "You're leaving?" James didn't meet her eyes. "I need to—" "The truth's out. I can't pretend anymore. And now that they all know, they'll come looking. Board members, press, investors, they'll want me to take the company back." "You could lead it differently," Clara said. "Maybe," he replied. "But I don't know if I want that life anymore." "And what about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James paused, his hands still. Then he looked up, gaze soft but steady. "You deserve someone who knows who he is," he said. "I'm still figuring that out." Her heart broke a little, but she understood. 3 days had passed. James was gone. No note. No call. Just gone. Clara sat alone on her back porch, nursing a cup of cold coffee, replaying the gala over and over in her head. His words, his calmness, the brutal elegance of his reveal. And how, despite everything, he still walked away. Not angry, just done. She missed him more than she expected. Not because of the revelation, but because of who he was before the world knew his name again. On the morning of the 4th day, Clara's phone buzzed non-stop, text after text, all saying the same thing. "Turn on the news." She grabbed the remote, heart racing, and flipped to the local Denver station. There he was, James Carter, on live television, sitting in a crisp charcoal suit, across from a top financial journalist on the morning show. The headline across the bottom read, "Revealed, Billionaire Heir Returns After Years in Hiding. Why I Walked Away." Clara's jaw dropped. The James she saw on screen was the same man she knew, but sharper. Stronger. More certain. "I left," James said clearly, "because I couldn't stand what my father's company had become. It was supposed to be about sustainability, about protecting the planet. But greed took over." He looked straight into the camera. "I needed time to strip away the noise, to remember who I really was." The interviewer leaned forward. "And now? Now I'm ready to rebuild, from the ground up, on my terms." At that same moment, Lauren watched the broadcast in her high-rise office, mouth slightly open. Her phone buzzed with messages from clients and friends. She stared at the screen. That was him? The guy she once mocked. The man she had dumped for lacking ambition. The homeless guy at brunch. Now he was commanding national attention, with quiet authority and respect. Lauren sank back in her chair, stunned. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt the one thing she never expected to feel: shame. Meanwhile, Clara couldn't take her eyes off the screen. The host continued. "Is there anyone you'd like to thank? Someone who helped you during your time away?" James paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Yes," he said, "but I think she knows." Clara's eyes filled with tears. He meant her. That evening, Clara's phone rang. It was Jenna. "Oh my God, Clara, your guy is everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, he's trending." "He's not my guy," Clara said softly, though her heart protested. "He could be," Jenna replied, "unless you let him slip away for good." Clara hung up and sat in silence. Was it too late? Did he still want the quiet life, or had the spotlight pulled him back in? One thing was certain. He was no longer hiding. And neither could she. The next day, Clara drove to the Carter Group's Denver office. She wore jeans and a soft blue blouse. No makeup, no script, just a heart full of truth. The receptionist at the front desk blinked in surprise. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Clara replied. "But tell James Carter, Clara Bennett is here." "He'll know." 10 minutes later, James appeared at the top of the marble staircase. He was in a tailored suit, but his eyes were the same. Calm. Warm. A little surprised. He walked down slowly. "Clara?" She didn't speak right away. Then, "I saw the interview." He nodded. "Didn't think you'd come." "I didn't know if I should," she admitted. "But then I realized, if I didn't try, I'd regret it." They stood in the silence of the lobby, surrounded by gold trim and polished stone, a different world from where they'd started. "I never cared about the name," she said. "Or the money. I cared about you." James studied her face. "Even when I was scrubbing dishes and sleeping in your guest room?" "Especially then," she whispered. He smiled, a real one, the kind he used to hide. "You want to come upstairs?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. I want to go back." "To where?" "To the life we had. The simple one. The honest one." James looked at her, the city lights behind him. And for the first time since he returned to the world, he realized something. The suits, the cameras, the legacy. It all meant nothing. Without her, James stood on the rooftop terrace of the Carter Group building, the Denver skyline glowing behind him. He had everything again. Power. Wealth. The Carter name restored. And yet his heart was more uncertain than ever. When Clara showed up at his office, something shifted. She hadn't come for status or closure. She came because she saw him, long before the world remembered who he was. Now he had a choice to make. That evening, James sat in the boardroom, surrounded by suits and spreadsheets. "We need you in New York by Friday," one exec said. "Media rollout. We've already lined up CNBC, The Times, and—" "I'm not going," James interrupted, voice calm but firm. The room froze. "I didn't come back to repeat the past," he said. "I came to rebuild it, on my terms." A few exchanged confused looks. "I'll fund the mission," James continued. "But I won't run it from a glass tower. My place isn't here." He stood, buttoned his coat, and left the room in stunned silence. Clara was watering her porch plants when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. James stood at the edge of her front steps, back in jeans, a soft jacket, and the same quiet smile she first noticed weeks ago. "I told them no," he said. She blinked. "To what?" "To all of it, the cameras. The cities, the titles." "Why?" He took a step closer. "Because I found something more important than rebuilding a company." She stared at him, unsure if this was real. "You," he said softly. "I found you." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. She stepped forward, placed a hand on his chest. "I thought I lost you." "You never did," he whispered. "I just had to remember who I was, and who I wanted to be, with you." She smiled. "So, what now?" He took her hand. "How do you feel about designing wildlife centers across the country? Quiet ones, simple." "No press, just purpose." Clara laughed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. And I want you there, as my partner, in work. In life." Somewhere in a high-rise office, Lauren sat alone watching James's latest statement online. He had rejected the spotlight, rejected power, for something money couldn't buy. Love, simplicity, integrity. And for the first time, she realized what she had truly lost. Weeks later, James and Clara stood on the land outside Boulder, Colorado. It was peaceful, open, full of birdsong and wind. "This will be our first site," James said, "a nature retreat. For kids, veterans, families, a place to heal." Clara squeezed his hand. "It's perfect." And in that moment, neither of them missed the city, the suits, the legacy, because they had built something bigger. A life worth living. Sometimes the world judges people by how they look, where they sleep, or what they wear. But true worth isn't in titles or money. It's in how we live, who we stand by, and what we choose to believe in. Clara believed in James when no one else did. And James? He never forgot it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Rate this video from 1 to 10. If you felt something, like, share. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. Until next time, stay kind and stay strong.